everyone, welcome back to the Nutrition Through the Life Cycle podcast. I'm your host Abby, and today we're going to be discussing all things menopause. I have a special guest, my mom.
Hi, I'm Becky. I'm 48 years old, so I'm in the menopausal age. I'm just hoping to get some guidance on how I can be my healthiest self as I'm going through menopause.
I think that's great. I'm going to start our discussion with a brief overview of just what menopause is, and I'm going to discuss certain diseases that menopause makes you a risk factor for, and then I'm going to give you some specific interventions that can help you prevent some of those diseases, specifically preventing obesity because it is a risk factor for many metabolic disorders. And then we're going to go into a brief Q&A to address maybe some misconceptions and some common questions that menopausal women might have. Menopause is the physiological event in every woman's life marked by the complete cessation of their menstrual cycles, and that cessation of the menstrual cycles has to be 12 months consecutively where there are no periods. And before menopause is perimenopause, which can last for 8 to 10 years before menopause, and this is marked by your ovaries slowly producing less and less estrogen, and during this time you might experience infrequent or just irregular periods. It can cause hot flashes and mood swings as well. It typically begins in your 40s, and menopause occurs between 45 and 55 usually. Once you haven't had your period for 12 months, you've entered menopause. Menopause is just that single event, and everything following it is post-menopause, where symptoms might ease up a bit, might not.
So why is menopause so scary?
Well, to answer that question, I need to educate you a bit on the importance of estrogen. So estrogen can improve the function of pancreatic beta cells by increasing insulin secretion. It can increase insulin sensitivity, of course, and it will inhibit osteoclast activity by regulating the expression of RANKL, and that's an essential cytokine for bone resorption. So that means that bone formation is going to be favored when there's high amounts of estrogen circulating in our body. So basically, it does a lot for our metabolic health and our bone health, and when it drops, there's going to be a lot of consequences. So that includes things like obesity, which might be a risk factor for type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dyslipidemia, and then of course, if bones aren't forming as much, that's going to be a risk factor for osteoporosis.
Wow.
So for the majority of these diseases, obesity is going to be a major risk factor, as I had mentioned. And a lot of women experience this in perimenopause, menopause, and even postmenopause. And there is a reason behind this. Estrogens can act on the pituitary hypothalamus circuit and inhibit a sense of hunger. Their menopause-related deficiency causes an increase in the orexigenic signals, and that causes an increased caloric intake accompanied by a reduction in energy expenditure. That also might cause menopause-related hyperandrogenism, and that's going to promote the redistribution of body fat. So if there was body fat mainly in the leg area, it's going to move up, and it's going to be more abdominal related.
So what are the risk factors of obesity during menopause?
Well, there's two types. There's non-modifiable and modifiable. Non-modifiable might look like aging, hormonal imbalance, so as we discussed, lower estrogen, things like that. High follicle stimulating hormone, lower satiety, and lower energy expenditure. So the modifiable things we can change, though, are a sedentary lifestyle, lower physical activity, higher consumption of high caloric foods and processed foods, low fiber, and mood disorders and emotional eating. All of those are things we can change, and the things I'm going to be focusing on throughout our podcast.
Perfect, okay.
So menopause does not have to be scary. There's many ways to improve our outcomes if we start now and even during menopause. So some of these strategies might include regular weight-bearing exercises, low inflammatory diets like the Mediterranean diet, and caloric deficits with adequate protein intake. So now let's get into our Q&A session. I'll have my mom start us off.
So one of the biggest questions I want to learn about is I'm like I said, I'm 48 years old. When I turned about 46, that's when my weight literally just shot up. So between the ages of 46 to 48, I gained anywhere from about 20 to 30 pounds. My BMI is currently at 27. So I'm interested in, what do you recommend to help lower my BMI?
So some of that weight gain, as we had mentioned, might be due to those perimenopausal symptoms, and that can simply be due to just lower estrogens circulating in your body. A general guideline for anyone who's overweight, in one of the studies I have, is to decrease your calories from 500 to 1,000 calories, so entering that caloric deficit. However, another guideline is to eat 25 calories per kilogram of weight. So for you, that translates to, I believe, 80 kilograms. So that's going to be about 2,000 calories per day.
That much? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anything lower than 1,200 calories has actually been linked to diets that just aren't sustainable, and weight gain or weight loss that's not going to be sustainable for you.
Okay.
Additionally, there's a protein recommendation. It's 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
So for you, the higher end is going to be 96 grams of protein.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I believe you had mentioned, how much calories are you currently consuming?
So, that varies. I was probably doing a little too few of what I needed to do. So some days, honestly, I was probably below 1,200 because I was restricting myself.
Mm-hmm.
Other days, I just had this attitude where I did not care, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if I ate 25 to 3,000 calories per day.
So in that case, I think consistency is going to be your best friend, and trying your best to stick to that 2,000 calorie range.
That sounds very doable.
Now,
Realistic.
that number is obviously different for everyone based on your weight, based on all kinds of things. So that's important to remember.
Okay. How is menopause an issue for inflammation? And why is the Mediterranean diet so important?
So first I want to kind of talk about the Mediterranean diet. It's a healthy dietary pattern characterized by adequate consumption of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, with a reduction of saturated animal fats in favor of unsaturated animal fats. It has a high intake of bioactive compounds, including polyphenols and omega-3 fatty acids, which have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant potency. But first, let's talk about why inflammation is even an issue related to menopause in the first place.
Yes.
So, as you guys know, abdominal fat is something that just happens to every woman, but especially women dealing with menopause. And abdominal fat can be considered an endocrine organ due to its capacity to secrete substances, including pro-inflammatory cytokines, and these things are closely related to metabolic diseases, including insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. It's been demonstrated that women going through the menopausal transition have deleterious changes in inflammatory markers and adipokines that correlated with increased visceral adiposity. So that state of estrogen deficiency is typical in menopause women, and it's going to lead to an increase in plasma pro-inflammatory cytokines, including tumor necrosis factor and various interleukins that are known to be associated with higher energy intake from fat. So particularly, this pro-inflammatory state can lead to an increased cardiovascular risk and bone demineralization. Overall, adherence to the Mediterranean diet leads for better outcomes during menopause, and that can reduce obesity, include better cardiometabolic profile, and just better management of your symptoms just by kind of reducing some of the inflammation that occurs during menopause.
Amazing. So despite feeling tired during the daytime, at night I just struggle to sleep throughout the night, and I wake up the middle of the night and I cannot fall back to sleep. What do you recommend?
Well, first and foremost, I want to recommend just a regular routine where you're waking up, you're seeing the sunlight, you're going to bed at a reasonable hour, and you're also including regular exercise throughout your day you're not just kind of laying around. So, you want to decrease some of your energy.
Okay.
However, there are certain foods that are high in tryptophan, which is a precursor to melatonin. So let's get into those. Sea fish, shellfish, algae, eggs, especially egg whites, soy, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, cheeses, and yeast all contain high levels of tryptophan. So that might be something you could implement in your diet if you like some of those foods. However, there's also some vitamins that are helpful.
Please review those, yes.
For example, vitamins B6, B12, magnesium, and zinc, they're all necessary for adequate sleep.
Okay.
So I think just trying some of those might help you out a bit.
Oh, that sounds so doable. Okay, great. So another thing that worries me about menopause is I seem to hear that I could be more at risk for cancer. Can you touch on different types of cancer that are more common during menopause?
So that's true. Menopause is a risk factor for 3 different types of cancer. These include ovarian cancers, breast cancers, and endometrial cancers. And that's mostly due to the amount of oxidative stress that's occurring in your body, which is also linked to lower amounts of estrogen.
Okay.
And I can actually explain that. So during menopause, there's an increase in oxidative stress characterized by an overproduction of free radicals, such as a reactive oxygen species, and by weakening of antioxidant levels. These are related to aging and lower estrogen levels. Okay, in particular, estrogen at high concentration can inhibit DNA from having oxidative damage. It inhibits, and specifically, the 8-hydroxylation of guanine DNA bases. With that being said, with low concentrations of estrogen, the hormone exerts a pro-oxidant function. So oxidative stress is like the most common thing we want to reduce when we're talking about preventing cancers.
Okay.
So in order to do that, we need to be eating foods that are natural antioxidants. So that might look like fruit, certain vegetables, things like that. But also we want to be exercising, because exercising is another way that our body reduces oxidative damage. So those would be the 2 most important tips I could give you.
Okay, thank you so much. So what would you say are some important interventions that someone can do who is going through menopause?
Well, I don't want to limit these interventions to someone who might be experiencing menopause, because I think it's most important that we make these changes ahead of time.
So true.
To prevent some of those outcomes. However, that's not to discourage them from making changes, because any change is going to be more beneficial than no change. So, first and foremost, I think that achieving and maintaining a healthy nutritional status, that includes a healthy BMI. So a BMI between 18.5 to 25 is going to be pretty good.
Okay.
And that includes a normal distribution of fat mass and skeletal muscle mass. So in order to do that, we talked about some tips, but I think weight-bearing activities are really important, because we did talk about osteoporosis, and so that's going to help preserve some of that bone mass, make your bone stronger, things like that. In cases of overweight or obesity, a general energy or caloric deficit is going to be beneficial. So reductions from 500 to 700 calories per day is going to be great, along with 1 to 1.2 grams of protein.
Okay.
Additionally, adequate intake of calcium, vitamin D, vitamin C, and B vitamins is very important. And I want to talk a lot about calcium and vitamin D, because those are super important in your bone formation.
Okay.
And when we're not receiving adequate amounts, that makes us more prone to things like osteoporosis, which menopause in itself is already a risk factor for osteoporosis. So those things are really important. Additionally, fruits and vegetables and things that are high in fiber are going to be super great, especially if you might be overweight. That might help you lose some of that weight.
Oh, great. Okay.
Regular consumption of low-fat protein sources, that also might help cover some of your calcium needs. However, a normal amount of, let's say, red meat and high-fat protein isn't going to be harmful. Just
Oh, good.
it has to be in moderate amounts though, and some of those foods do provide good benefits for you, so you don't want to completely starve yourself of those.
Oh, good, because I love my steak.
Additionally, using a little amount of sugar and salt as possible to flavor food and drinks is going to be really helpful. That might help you enter just kind of like a natural caloric deficit if you maybe like limit your sweeteners and things like that. And a portion of salt could even be replaced with fresh or dried herbs, which are really...
Ooh, I love that.
That's a great alternative.
Okay.
Back to our fat intake, the amount of saturated fat should not exceed 10% of the total energy intake. So if you use food tracking apps, like maybe, I know you use MyFitnessPal,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great way to see, am I eating too little, too much fat, things like that.
Great, okay. And you said 10%, right?
Yes, no more than 10%. And these are just general guidelines, but a smoking-free lifestyle definitely recommended, as well as reduced alcohol consumption.
Yes. Okay.
We all know those things. And yeah, anything else?
No. I feel like I have a much more better understanding, and it honestly doesn't seem quite so scary. You know, I mean, it seems like it's manageable. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being
This
my
has been
guest
great.
today.
Oh no, thank you.
Well, guys, that's it for the Nutrition in the Life Cycle podcast today. We'll see you whenever.
Bye.